Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add.
I call this list not for women. And then from the thumbnail, I asked how big your hands are. And physically, I feel like ladies have small hands, and the whole purpose of this deck is to draw your whole deck and hold it. So if you're one of the types that needs to pick up half their deck to shuffle, it's probably not the deck for you. Anatomically speaking, I guess men can have small hands too. Wink.
I have a micro penis.
I could hold my deck with just one hand. If you don't know what Niv-Mizzet does, you have no max hand size. And then if a source steals damage or non-combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards. He's the inverse of the previous iterations of Niv-Mizzet we've gotten. Funny enough, because they're inverse, they go infinite with each other. Niv-Mizzet, the Fire Mind, and Niv-Mizzet per run. Both of them say when you draw, you deal damage. You don't want either of the Niv-Mizzets to come down until you're good and ready to make the closing play. I think Niv-Mizzet is the best Dragon's Approach commander you could possibly play because it turns your Dragon's Approach into a 3-mana draw 12. So it's like a cracked out Thrumming Stone with your commander. I like lists where you don't have to make over 30% of the list one card. You could get away with 15 copies, 12 copies, whatever, but I think 15 is a good number for my playtesting. If I go uninteracted with, I usually close out games on turn 5, and this is $108. So not quite in the $100 budget range, but pretty darn close. Considering $37 of my budget is for Dragon's Approach. Because Niv-Mizzet and Dragon's Approach are so great with each other, you use Dragon's Approach to get the other Niv-Mizzet pairings, and then you just win the game from there. Hopefully you don't accidentally draw them both, because then you'll be screwed and you have to hard cast them. But that's normally how the deck wins. We have other ways of winning, like Jace Wheeler Mysteries and Laboratory Mania, and we have safety valves to prevent ourselves from drawing our decks and killing ourselves.
Careful with that dragon. It's
like Obstinate Familiar. If you draw a card, you skip that draw instead. And it's a 1 mana draw body. The curve on this list is pretty low. It's 1.74. 60% of it's red. Some good upgrades if you are interested is Burgi and the Urabrask from Martian Machine. But they're a little out of budget. They're like $16 each. So unfortunately, you couldn't play them. But we got some cool coupons that aren't as good, but they do the job. I have Baral, Chief of Compliance, Goblin Electromancer, Ral, Monsoon Mage. I never play with Ral, and I've always wanted to. He fits that coupon of being 2 mana or less. Stormcatch Mentor, Thunderclap Drake. So in total, I think that makes 5 coupon creatures that exist in Magic right now. The backside of Monsoon Mage is exiles himself and comes back. He comes in with additional loyalty based on the number of instants and sorceries you cast that turn. You could potentially -8 him on the spot, exile 8 cards from your library, and cast instants and sorceries for free. Not too hard to do, and then his +1's basically his front side where you could cast instant sorceries at 1 less till your next turn, so you get a full revolution in the table, which means it's basically turned on all the time. Neheb the Eternal is perfect in this list because your goal is to just slug people for a bunch of damage efficiently, and then you float a bunch of mana main phase 2 to cast more spells, and when you deal damage to people, you draw more cards. So like it's a very vicious kind of cycle. Scalding Viper, get a little cheap interaction to bounce something, but whenever an opponent casts a spell 3 or less, you deal damage to a player, and I would say people are getting more and more efficient at building their decks, so 3 or less value is pretty common. Every time that it triggers, you see a card with your commander, so Niv-Mizzet does fit a nice slug theme if you wanted to do it. I wish I could have fit Mana Barbs in here because that's like $4, but I went with the Dragon's Approach. That's where each copy is like $3, so Had to live with that choice. Sphere Spewer, it's just an efficient 1 mana. I draw a bunch of cards for every activation. I see 3 cards with every tap ability. Treasure Nabber to snag some artifacts and ramp. Our commander costs 6, so we need to consistently get him out early and or get him back out should he die. He's a pretty integral part of our game plan. Voldaren Epicure, 1 mana investment to deal 1 damage to each opponent, so it's a 1 mana to see 3 cards. So you want Blazing Volley. Boltway is pretty good in this list. You, for 1 mana, see 9 cards. Can't go wrong with that. End the festivities. Another 1 mana, see a bunch of cards. Flame Rift, this is 2 mana, see 12 cards. Take down a hazard and a 1 mana, just hit each opponent kind of spell. We got our interaction at instant speed. A lot of these are just mana. I'm running 12 artifacts dedicated just to making mana to cast our commander, but we got some fun stuff like Midnight Clock. This is also one of our safety valves. It makes us shuffle our hand, which should be incredibly large at some point, to prevent ourselves from drawing ourselves to death. Semblance Anvil, you always want to pick sorcery for this, so then your dragon's approaches become 1 mana.
They're cheap.
We got Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots to protect our board. Kumano faces a Kekazan. This is just a 1 mana, draw 3. And the rest are lands, so this is a quick tech, and I'm really looking forward to playing it, so let's get to it.